idle or the busy, who passed in review before them in the main street of the country town, near to which I passed the first 14 years of my existence. But my father, who was a clergyman of the Church of England, and the youngest brother of a noble family, had a lucrative living, and a soul above buttons, if his son had not. It has been from time immemorial the heathenish custom to sacrifice the greatest fool of the family to the prosperity and naval superiority of the country, and at the age of 14 I was selected as the victim. If the custom be judicious, I had no reason to complain. There was not one dissentient voice when it was proposed before all the varieties of my aunts and cousins, invited to partake of our New Year's festival. I was selected by general acclamation. Flattered by such a unanimous acknowledgment of my qualification, and a stroke of my father's hand down my head which accompanied it, I felt as proud, and alas, as unconscious as the calf with gilded horns, who plays and mumbles with the flowers of the garland which designates his fate to everyone but himself. I even felt, or thought I felt, a slight degree of military ardour, and a sort of vision of future grandeur passed before me, in the distant vista of which I perceived a coach with 4 horses and a service of plate. It was, however, driven away, before I could decipher it, by positive bodily pain, occasioned by my elder brother Tom, who, having been directed by my father to snuff the candles, took the opportunity of my abstraction to insert a piece of the still-ignited cotton into my left ear. But as my story is not a very short one, I must not dwell too long on its commencement. I shall therefore inform the reader that my father, who lived in the north of England, did not think it right to fit me out at the country town near to which we resided, but about a fortnight after the decision which I have referred to, he forwarded me to London on the outside of the coach, with my best suit of bottle green and 6 shirts. To prevent mistakes, I was booked in the way-bill, to be delivered to Mr. Thomas Handicock, No. 14 St. Clement's Lane, carriage paid. My parting with the family was very affecting. My mother cried bitterly, for like all mothers, she liked the greatest fool which she had presented to my father better than all the rest. My sisters cried because my mother cried. Tom roared for a short time more loudly than all the rest, having been chastised by my father for breaking his 4th window in that week, during all which my father walked up and down the room with impatience, because he was kept from his dinner, and, like all orthodox divines, he was tenacious of the only sensual enjoyment permitted to his cloth. At last I tore myself away. I'd blubbered till my eyes were so red and swollen that the pupils were scarcely to be distinguished, and tears and dirt had veined my cheeks like the marble of the chimney-piece. My handkerchief was soaked through with wiping my eyes and blowing my nose before the scene was over. My brother Tom, with a kindness which did honour to his heart, exchanged his for mine, saying with fraternal regard, "Here, Peter, take mine, it's as dry as a bone." But my father would not wait for a second handkerchief to perform its duty. He led me away through the hall, when, having shaken hands with all the men and kissed all the maids, who stood in a row with their aprons to their eyes, I quitted my paternal roof. The coachman accompanied me to the place from whence the stage was to start. Having seen me securely wedged between 2 fat old women, and having put my parcel inside, he took his leave, and in a few minutes I was on my road to London. I was too much depressed to take notice of anything during my journey. When we arrived in London, they drove to the Blue Boar, in a street the name of which I have forgotten. I had never seen or heard of such an animal, and certainly it did appear very formidable. Its mouth was open and teeth very large. What surprised me still more was to observe that its teeth and hoofs were of pure gold. Who knows, thought I, that in some of the strange countries which I am doomed to visit, but that I may fall in with and shoot one of these terrific monsters. With what haste shall I select those precious parts, and with what joy should I, upon my return, pour them as an offering of filial affection into my mother's lap? And then, as I thought of my mother, The tears again gushed into my eyes. The coachman threw his whip to the ostler, and the reins upon the horses' backs. He then dismounted, and calling to me, "Now, young gentleman, I's a-waiting," he put a ladder up for me to get down by. Then, turning to a porter, he said to him, "Bill, you must take this here young gentleman and that here parcel to this here direction. Please to remember the coachman, sir." I replied that I certainly would, if he wished it, and walked off with the porter, the coachman observing as I went away, "Well, he is a fool, that's certain." I arrived quite safe at St. Clement's Lane, when the porter received a shilling for his trouble from the maid who let me in, and I was shown up into a parlour where I found myself in company with Mrs. Handicock. Mrs. Handicock was a little meagre woman who did not speak very good English, and who appeared to me to employ the major part of her time in bawling out from the top of the stairs to the servants below. I never saw her either read a book or occupy herself with needlework. During the whole time I was in the house. She had a large grey parrot, and I really cannot tell which screamed the worse of the two, but she was very civil and kind to me, and asked me 10 times a day when I'd last heard of my grandfather, Lord Privilege. I observed that she always did so if any company happened to call in during my stay at her house. Before I'd been there 10 minutes, she told me that she adored sailors. They were the defendiers and preserviers of their kings and countries, and that Mr. Handicock would be home by 4 o'clock, and then we should go to dinner. Then she jumped off her chair to bawl to the cook from the head of the stairs, Jemima, Jemima, we'll have the whiting boiled instead of fried." "Can't, ma'am," replied Jemima. "They be all hegged and crumbled with their tails in their mouths." "Well, then, never mind, Jemima," replied the lady. "Don't put your finger into the parrot's cage, me love. He's apt to be cross with strangers. Mr. Handicock will be home at 4 o'clock, and then we shall have our dinner. Are you fond of fighting?" As I was very anxious to see Mr. Handicock, and very anxious to have my dinner, I was not sorry to hear the clock on the stairs strike 4, when Mrs. Handicock again jumped up and put her head over the banisters. "Jemima, Jemima, it's 4 o'clock." "I hear it, ma'am," replied the cook, and she gave the frying-pan a twist, which made the hissing and the smell come flying up into the parlour, and made me more hungry than ever. Rap, tap, tap. "There's your master, Jemima," screamed the lady. "I hear him, ma'am," replied the cook. "Run down, me dear, and let Mr. Handicock in," said his wife. "He'll be so surprised at seeing you open the door." I ran down, as Mrs. Handicock desired me, and opened the street door. "Who the devil are you?" in a gruff voice cried Mr. Handicock. A man about 6 feet high, dressed in blue cotton net pantaloons and Hessian boots, with a black coat and waistcoat. I was a little rebuffed, I must own, but I replied that I was Mr. Simple. "And pray, Mr. Simple, what would your grandfather say if he saw you now? I have servants in plenty to open my door, and the parlour is the proper place for young gentlemen." "Law, Mr. Handicock," said his wife from the top of the stairs, "how can you be so cross? I told him to open the door to surprise you." "And you have surprised me," replied he, "with your cursed folly." While Mr. Handicock was rubbing his boots on the mat, I went upstairs rather mortified, I must own, as my father had told me that Mr. Handicock was his stockbroker, and would do all he could to make me comfortable. Indeed, he had written to that effect in a letter which my father showed to me before I left home. When I returned to the parlour, Mrs. Handicock whispered to me, "Never mind, my dear, it's only 'cause there's something wrong on 'Change. Mr. Handicock is a bear just now." I thought so too, but I made no answer, for Mr. Handicock came upstairs, and walking with 2 strides from the door of the parlour to the fireplace, turned his back to it, and lifting up his coat-tails, began to whistle. "Are you ready for your dinner, my dear?" said the lady, almost trembling. "If the dinner is ready for me, I believe we usually dine at 4, answered her husband gruffly. "Jemima, Jemima, dish up. Do you hear, Jemima?" "Yes, ma'am," replied the cook. "Directly I've thickened the butter." And Mrs. Handicock resumed her seat with, "Well, Mr. Simple, and how's your grandfather, Lord Privilege?" "He's quite well, ma'am," answered I, for the 15th time at least. But dinner put an end to the silence which followed this remark. Mr. Handicock lowered his coat tails and walked downstairs, leaving his wife